Hello everybody, Jardian here. Today I wanted to give my first impressions and a short initial review of this new budget sword from the company Swordier. This is a very unique piece, it's called their Katana-Chokuto hybrid, and I really haven't seen much like it on the market. This piece was sent to me for free for review, but instead of the normal process where they would choose somebody and send it, they actually just posted this on the Sword Buyer's Guide forum and said that the first three people to message them would get a review copy. So I was fortunate to be on at the time, and bonus points for them interacting with the community. I think that is very cool. I do plan on making a full review of this sword in the future with more cutting targets, durability testing, etc. But I wanted to use this chance to get all the basics and stats out of the way and talk about what I think after a week of using it. To quickly go over the packaging, I found it perfectly acceptable. You have a double box set up with foam inserts to keep the sword from moving around, company logo on front, and a puncture wound on the left, which didn't seem to affect the sword in any way. And in addition, you get a little tag that has basic information, just says that it's a katana, and it looks like I got Inspector number 10. Well, let's start taking a look at this thing, starting at the bottom. And the sword immediately sticks out for its long black lanyard and that metal ring replacing the kashira. This Suka does not have Fuchi, Kashira, or Minuki. I do not believe it's meant to be disassembled. And just to show that that little metal ring on the end does connect to the blade, making this a true full tang. Getting on to some specs, this Suka is 10.5 inches with an extra inch with that ring, so if you hold the entire thing you have 11.5 inches there. It is black leather over imitation black ray skin, and overall I was very impressed with the tightness of the Ito. I don't think I mentioned it yet, but this sword goes for $99, and for me the shipping was $50, so roughly $150 sword, and for that I thought there was an acceptable amount of give. I've certainly seen looser swords that were more expensive. A few more notes on the Suga before I move on. Firstly, I just want to talk about how small it is. I'm going to have it next to my Hanwei XL Lite, which is one of my favorite handling swords, and hopefully the contrast is clear with just how narrow they made this Katana-Chokuto. Now, I'm glad manufacturers are moving away from big axe handle Suka, they do not feel good, but shaping is also very important. When it comes to this one, the flat side is 1¼ inches, and on the spine side, assuming you hit the leather on both sides, it's an inch. So it's almost the same dimensions all the way around, leading to a blocky feel instead of that nice ovular or teardrop shape many would prefer. And finally, I just wanted to mention that the blade and Suka don't seem to be perfectly aligned. Hopefully you can see there that on the bottom or the spine side, it's great alignment, good transition, but the top juts out about 1/4 inch. I'm not sure if it's intentional, but you definitely notice it when you look at the sword. Not a big deal to me, but I thought I should mention it. Alright, getting to the Suba, you guys knew I had to mention it. I think the little ninja Suba is so silly. For me, just my aesthetics, I think this really brings down the entire look of the sword. I think it's a little cheesy, and it would have been amazing if they just had a small ovular Chokuto-style Suba. That would have looked great. Functionally, though, it is made of iron. I do like that it's a small Suba. Unfortunately, talking about function, it does have just a ton of little pointy bits and extremities sticking out, which make it a bit annoying. When I would try to move the sword around behind me in my belt, it caught on my shirt and such. But overall, it's what we got. And I should mention that the other models do not have this Ninja Suba. I got 1 out of 3, and this one happens to have this guy. Moving above the Suba, you can see that this sword does not have a habaki, and thus there are slight gaps on both sides of the blade, but honestly not much worse than you see on swords that do have habaki. It's not poorly fitted, and if anything, the lack of habaki does kind of give it a unique look. It reminds me of the Hanwei Dark Sentinel, if anyone remembers that. Alright, getting to the blade, it is 28 inches and has a very unique geometry. Obviously, this is wider and thinner than your typical Shinogi Zukuri, but even beyond that, it's interesting how about half of the blade is bevel and half is your Shinogi. So I'm not sure if you would still call it Kihira Zukuri, which I typically associate with the bevel being very close to the bottom, basically where their hamon is. But it's very interesting. You have enough Shinogi for support for the thin blade, and you have enough bevel that it can still do some fine cutting. Speaking of the spine thickness, I wanted to get this out of the way now. Their website and their post about the sword all say that this is a 5mm thick spine. But for me, checking with my calipers, I consistently got 4 millimeters almost exactly. You can see I'm fidgeting doing it with one hand and recording, but even then, almost every measurement is right around 4, so not sure what the discrepancy is, if I messed up or they did. Just wanted to bring it up. Overall, I found the finish of the blade pretty nice, besides the little rust fingerprint, obviously, but the polish is perfectly acceptable on a budget sword like this, and being 1060, I'm sure it would take a very easy polish with some mother's mag. No complaints there. In terms of the forging and lines, however, I feel like it could have been improved even for a budget piece. I'm not sure how well the video shows, but there are a lot of ripples in the blade and the lines are all pretty muddy. It's not a big deal just for cutting, but should be brought up. As far as the Kasaki goes, the design isn't exactly my cup of tea, but obviously they're going for the Chokuto look. Unfortunately, with the Kasaki, this first side I'm showing you is done very well. It terminates at the exact right position, but as you see on the other side here, not the best. It's bent over to the side and wasn't finished very well. In terms of the saya, I'm very happy with it. I think the black speckled saya is the best budget saya, probably besides black lacquer and bare wood to me. It's very well fit, there's not a lot of rattle, and despite the lack of habaki, it actually holds very well. I think I'll show here, but after a week of use, it's to the point where the saya still stays on, and the blade only comes out with a bit of push. It really is impressive how much slimmer they made it over my similarly wide Hanwei XL Lite, which I always thought was a bit bulky in the belt. This sword feels great in the belt and is much slimmer, although obviously there are benefits to having all that extra wood on the saya. And finally, we are going to get to handling and cutting. Here you can see the sword is exactly 2 pounds on my scale, which I found very impressive. So it's a 2-pound sword, and it has about a 5.5 inch point of balance, giving it a very unique feel. It's very easy to move around, and I really enjoy it the more I use it. This sword did not come very sharp at all, but that thin geometry makes it an absolute monster for pool noodles. I plan on doing a polish and sharpen for my full review, but for now this is the out-of-the-box experience. As you can see, it absolutely decimates pool noodles, even with me doing more tip cuts, and had absolutely no problems getting through them. They always get pretty difficult towards the bottom, but again, this is a very thin, wide blade, and I think with pool noodles, geometry is more important than actual edge sharpness. Now, bottles I find to be a different story. I think that having a keen edge really helps you slice through them rather than popping them or just crushing the plastic, and this sword did tend to struggle with the cutting. Obviously, I'm very rusty. In fact, if you watch my channel, you may have noticed I haven't cut bottles in a very long time. I actually stopped using them personally, like I got a water filter, so that's why I've been cutting vegetables and stuff. So for this video and the review, I got into my last stash. I've got a few bags left. But all of that to say, the sword did not do the best against the bottles. I expect it'll be very different after I do a sharpening in the next video. I think it'll be an absolutely wicked bottle cutter. As it is though, this is more a showcase of the sword's handling. I find it very comfortable. I really love light swords with forward point of balances, like my Hanwei XL Lite. And even without the good edge, there was a lot of chopping and popping through the bottles. I went for 2 doubles, and I think I hit them both first try in this video, so definitely good handling, fun to cut with, and I think it'll sharpen up very nicely. Alright everybody, as we're finishing up here, I'll try to gather up my miscellaneous thoughts. And for starters, let's just talk about the company. I think it's cool that Swordier is coming out with budget items, and they're doing things outside of the norm. There's a lot of little imperfections with this sword that I've showed, but I try to keep in mind that this is not a standard part spin katana. I think that gives it a lot more room for error, and there's a lot more I can forgive because of that. I would absolutely understand if some of the flaws turned off other people, but for me, I do think this is worth 150 bucks. In the same price range, you really have Ronin entry-level swords, which for a standard katana, they are absolutely the best, but this is a different beast. I mean, if somebody just wants a dedicated light cutter, or they like the Chokuto look, or they just like weird stuff like this, I think it's a good product, and I wouldn't feel ripped off if I had bought this. Of course, things may change with my final review. I'm going to be doing durability testing and testing a lot more targets, but we will see. But yeah, I hope this company continues to put out products like this. I like cheap stuff, I like unique stuff, and I think we have enough high-end Long Chuan part spin katanas going out there. It's good to have different stuff on the market, and for example, Swordier, highly recommend making a Kogurasumara version of this. It already has the half shinogi. It would be one of the most fun light cutters on the market. But anyway, thank you to everybody who made it this far in the video. Thank you, Swordier, for the sword. Feel free to send me stuff anytime. I hope I was able to show off everything people want to see in this as far as my initial review goes. And please look forward to a further review, which is a lot more comprehensive. Thank you all for watching. See you guys next time.